here together with Tom Garrahan at the Marketing to O conference. You're the moderator today, and we're talking about the digital reset. Why do we have to talk about it?
That's a good question. I'm not sure we really do need to talk about the digital reset. I don't think that there is a general requirement to reset much. I think there is potentially a need to focus on what the world knows. For the past 3 or 4 years, I think, it's always been about trying new things and learning. And from the learning, developing a new strategy. And I think that in the beginning, it was pretty much the same approach for everybody. It was really trial and error. And you came to things that worked. I think for some companies, they can improve by learning what the best companies, the most successful companies do well. I think overall, what each company has developed for themselves is one set of experiences. The one set of experiences can be bad, they can be good. But I think that one of the things that you do see is that the methodologies used to go after the best experiences aren't necessarily the same. And I think that if there's one thing that people can get from a refocus, and that is to look at how people are learning better than maybe in other companies. And I think really that's it, and then applying it. Some companies seem to be doing really, really well, and I think other companies seem to do it less well, and that's it.
We heard today in the discussion that some of the speakers said, well, it's a problem of the executive board, and maybe we still need some years until they really embrace these ideas. Do you think it's a generation problem?
No, I don't think it's a generation problem. I think you had enough examples of people talking today who are getting it right. And I think that when you have companies where the senior management is fully aware of how important social media is, they give it its proper due. Sometimes it doesn't happen like that, where companies have senior management that are so far away from what happens in the social media department, that they pay no attention to it. The guys who actually work in social media, they know what they need to do, but if they're that far away from the senior management, it's very difficult for them to basically be acting on their own, especially in companies that are very, very heavily regimented. I think, for example, we heard examples of companies that have very, very strict considerations as to what gets released in social media. We heard some examples where in, let's say, 2 companies that are equally regimented, one does it extremely well. For example, the WHO, they seem to have a very, very well thought out process as to how they can respond very, very quickly around the world with very, very little resource. And if anybody's going to be heavily regimented or regulated, it's going to be an NGO like the WHO. Within banks, even though of course there's a commercial interest there, the quality of the information or the kind of information that is released is no more sensitive than what the WHO might release. But the banks, for whatever reason, they have not really embraced how to do this or how to use this effectively. So I don't really think it's a question of generation. I don't think it's really a question of even industry. I think it's really a question of how individual companies have embraced this.
Can we somehow push this shift forward as a project lead?
I think it really has to do with how effective probably the internal organizations are. And I would say, for example, start with the departments who run social media, how they market the way they operate within the company to the senior management. I think that's a very, very important part of this. If senior management is fully aware of how important it is and how it needs to run, I think by and large that they will support it. I mean, I work with organizations that are very, very high, live or have e-commerce as a very important part of their business. And they see very, very directly how important social media is to traffic, how important it is to product acceptance, how important it is to recommendations, and all these kinds of things. For organizations where you do not have e-commerce, sometimes the benefit of social media is less apparent. I mean, if you're not getting a direct sort of impact on sales from social media, maybe it's harder to measure in some instances. You know, if you're just responding to customer queries, maybe the impact on sales is not so clear. And in those cases, maybe it's harder to convince senior management that they need to be more involved, that they need to set up essentially, you know, proper operating procedures in order to let it run the way it needs to run.
Great, thank you.